A major ruling from a judge will allow the public to see inside the home of Hollywood legend Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa after they were found dead. We're breaking down the latest courtroom battle over whether the body cam video, autopsies, and other documents captured by law enforcement should be released.
I don't believe that the press has any sort of vested interest in this case other than exploiting these deaths, these tragic deaths, for personal profit or gain.
And the strong words from the late actor's estate to keep that access private, as there are also major questions about where Hackman's $80 million fortune will go. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. There is a major exception in the materials that a judge is allowing to be released to the public in the death investigations of Gene Hackman, his wife Betsy Arakawa, and their dog. They were found dead inside their home in Santa Fe, New Mexico on February 26th. Hackman was 95 years old. His wife Betsy was 65 years old, and their dog was found in a crate. We later learned it recently had a procedure and had to be confined. How the couple died is no longer a mystery. The medical examiner determined that Gene Hackman died of a combination of Alzheimer's and heart disease. Betsy died of a rare but dangerous infectious disease called hantavirus. It's carried by rodents, and it can have initial symptoms like fatigue and fever. It's so rare that the Department of Health in New Mexico says there have only been 156 cases of this in the last 50 years in the state, but more than 40% of those cases were fatal. Their dog was unable to survive without food and water as it was trapped in that crate, with both owners having passed away. As more details of this story have come to light, the more it appears it was a sad and tragic finish for this couple who spent much of their final years trying to be out of the public spotlight. Deputies say that Arakawa died first on February 12th. She was found in a bathroom with a medication bottle on the counter and pills scattered nearby. There was a space heater near her on the ground, which led people to believe that she had suddenly fallen and taken that down with her. Her husband, Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, who was roughly 30 years her senior, died after her. Police believe that he passed on February 18th. That is 6 days after his wife. He had a pacemaker that recorded its last event on that day, according to Santa Fe deputies. Gene Hackman was found dead in a mudroom with a cane and sunglasses near him. It's unclear if he was aware that his wife had died days prior. The medical examiner did say he was, quote, in rough shape when she described his health and his battle with dementia. While the questions about how this couple passed have been answered, there's a legal battle over what people should be able to see from the day that deputies were called to the home after a contractor arrived for work and noticed that something was wrong. Media organizations have argued they have a right to see the body cam video from deputies who went inside the home the day that Hackman and his wife were found dead. But Hackman's estate and Hackman's adult children have argued the release of that information would just create more trauma. We do have some body camera video. You're taking a look at that right here from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. It's all from outside the house on the day that they responded. Here's one of the initial conversations a deputy had with the contractor who arrived and noticed something was wrong.
You're gonna go in the house at all? Nobody went in the house, right? Nobody went in? No, nobody went in.
No, EMTs went in.
The EMTs were the first ones.
They were
very brief, just
brief, and I told them we weren't supposed to go in, and they were like, okay, because I was like, he could be in there, we don't know. I've got a way to get a hold of his kids, okay. And so a friend of theirs, I got a hold of him. He's got a hold of the lady that's in charge of the estate, and she's saying that she just talked to Betsy a couple of days ago, so I don't see how, but she wants you to call her.
Yeah, we will. We're just trying to, because who they are, I don't have one on me. I just want to keep this limited as much as possible, because once this gets out, you know how this is going to turn with the, you know. So we got to figure out what's going on first. My concern is a carbon monoxide issue right now.
Kelly, she knows.
So I want to have them
Joey,
test.
do you want to come up here? Because I'm going to need help with the dogs, and you can give them this
So
information.
her family's been notified, okay? They know what's happened up here. Her family.
Okay. He has a couple of kids, okay, that from previous. They didn't have any kids together.
Okay, well,
we just now found a way to get in contact.
Right, let's just try to limit any...
I
was
telling everyone, we were telling the EMT guys, look, you guys please don't tell anybody. So anyone that I'm involving is close because I worked for him for 16 years. Everything was tight. I've worked for him for 28, and the bottom line was, don't ever mention our name.
Right.
Privacy was...
No, that's understandable. Like I said, we just want to figure out what's going on.
Oh, sure, no, I understand.
Because that's going to be the question, what happened, and we need to figure that out.
Right,
So, but first thing is the safety of being inside of there.
Sure, of course,
of course.
What are you going to do with carbon monoxide?
You're having fire come back out.
Okay.
So, but then, like I said, I'm going to have another detective coming out, and at that point, they'll probably interview you guys a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
And then we'll go from there.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So just hang tight.
Much of that body cam video is of deputies waiting outside the house as the gas company does an inspection. Initially, deputies were concerned there was a carbon monoxide leak and potentially that led to Gene Hackman and his wife's deaths, but it was later found that that was not the case. So many of the stories that we cover here on The Case and on Law and Crime prove that life is unpredictable and having a great attorney matters, and that's where we bring in our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is the law firm that has more than 1,000 attorneys, and that's because they win a lot. Just in the last couple of months, they were able to secure a $9.3 million verdict for a car accident victim in Florida, $5.6 million for a car crash victim in Atlanta, and $1.8 million in Kentucky. And in that case, the insurance company was going to offer just $5,000. So even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to file a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you are hurt, you want to file a claim, head over to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also click the link in the description of this video or scan the QR code on your screen.
And that thing's got a big vent, comes out right by the front door, so...
Well, that's kind of where he is, though, right?
By the front door?
Yeah.
Well, no, it comes out through the roof.
Well, it smells like it in the kitchen, though. That's the only thing.
Yeah, there's nothing in the kitchen that can make enough carbon monoxide. The only thing is the range. It's best to check it.
Yeah, I'm like, unless it could have been a slow leak for a while, though.
The range ain't gonna do carbon monoxide like this. The mechanical room, as hot as they keep that house,
And they keep it really...
The mechanical room's got 2 or 3 big old boilers. Like I said,
that's the one that's downstairs, right?
Yes, and that big vent you see right by up on the roof by the front door, that thing's like that big around, and so it's meant to vent. And so I just don't, and that mechanical room is pretty damn tight. I don't see carbon dioxide getting.
And it wouldn't leak through any of the kitchen appliances?
Shouldn't. I mean, I don't see how this is, both of them are down like this. Something's not right. And so, maybe.
Well, that's why it's a little weird. Because you could smell it a bit in the kitchen, which is, you know, close to where he was, but she's not. So,
and that door was open.
Right.
Her door was open. They're never open. The doors were locked. The doors are never locked up here. The doors are never locked. And they're open because
do you guys have any like photos or any recent photos of her? By chance?
No, I just seen her going in and out.
Okay.
Maybe about, I was just thinking about 2
These
weeks
people
ago.
are super bright.
Yeah. Yeah, I seen it about 2
You know who he
weeks
is,
ago.
right?
I've heard of the name, but I'm not sure who. 32. I didn't think about it for a
If you were
second.
lived in the 90s, you would have. He was one of the biggest movie stars.
I think if I could, like, you know, see something.
Did you see the thing downstairs with Will Smith? What was the one where he just looked God, what was the movie? It should be downstairs. I can't remember the movie. But he was extremely private people.
How old is he?
He just turned 85. He just had a birthday like a couple weeks ago.
And she's how old?
About 60, late 60s.
Late 60s.
Late 60s, maybe. thought Dwayne told me she was close to like 62, 63.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there, so 60s.
Does she, do they get out a bunch, or?
Oh yeah,
well,
I see him every day. You know, going in and out. He
Okay.
always gives me shit, you know, because I buy vehicles.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. Gay, it's time for a brand new vehicle. You know, all the time. He would drive by and, you know, wave, and her too, all the time.
Yeah.
Every day they'd be going in and out. They seem happy, you know, but they go in different cars.
What time does this lady work till?
They're down there at the gatehouse. They're down at the gatehouse now.
Do you want to call her and see if she can at least get see if she can kind of just look up the last time that they were in and out of the gate?
Probably the 8th February.
What's
I would
today?
think, you know,
last contact I had with her was 2.5 weeks ago, because we've been working on the fire suppression for up in here. She's worried about fires. 2.5
So you got here and saw that the door was open, right? And saw her.
Me and him.
You guys both did.
Yeah, he walked down on that side. He checked the door on that side. It was locked, and he said, "This door is never locked." So then we kept walking, and I seen something laying there. I thought it was animals that she has.
Yeah.
Until I seen him like just buckle up, turn around, and then that's when I see him laying there. You know, it's like.
So you said the 8th?
No, the last time I seen them was probably around the 8th of February, going in and out.
Okay.
And that's like about 2 weeks, 2.5
Yeah,
weeks.
2.5 weeks.
The last
Yeah.
email I had, I
Yeah.
think, was on the 9th.
Yeah.
For her.
Yeah.
8th or 9th. It was.
Yeah.
I don't think it's been that long for whatever happened with them.
Now, we hear a lot in these body cams about just how private the Hackmans were, which is a cornerstone of the argument that their estate is making in court to keep videos private. Here's part of what the attorney for the Hackman estate said in his opening statement yesterday.
Please report. Your Honor, this case is about a celebrity couple who lived in very private lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They took great pains to stay out of the public light. They lived in a private gated community. They lived very quietly in Santa Fe, and unfortunately they died a very tragic death. They would not want to have their privacy invaded by having the tragic deaths exploited by the press. This case raises issues of right to privacy and potential security issues for the estate. Mr. and Mrs. Hackman had an expectation and the right of publicity during their lifetimes and after their deaths. They had a right to control their names, their likeness, and their image during their life, and the estate has the right to control their names, likeness, and images after their deaths. The Hackmans controlled access to their home during their lifetime. The Hackmans never conducted interviews in their home and never provided access to the press to their home. By releasing the video cams and investigative material to the public, the Sheriff's Office will be undermining that control exercised by the Hackmans during their life and the estate's right following their deaths. The disclosure of the videos is simply another way of circumventing the control the estate should retain, as the Hackmans did during their lifetime. The request for the video cam is nothing more than a backdoor exposure to the Hackmans' lifestyle that could not be attained by the press during their lifetime. The petitioner has pending 2 probates. And under the probate code, she has 3 months to conduct an inventory of the estates. By releasing the video cams of the Hackman's home, the estate will make public an inventory of the home before the personal representative has time to conduct such an inventory. And further, since the probate code does not require the publication of an inventory, the release of the video cams will undermine the private probate process under New Mexico law, and in fact violate the provisions of the probate code by the publication of the estate's probate inventory by publishing the video cams. Petitioner is thus seeking 2 determinations: a declaration that the estates of Gene and Betsy Arakawa Hackman have a right of publicity to protect the name, likeness, and image of Gene and Betsy Hackman. A declaration that Gene Hackman and Betsy Hackman families have a constitutional right to privacy. The essence of this matter is that petitioner seeks a determination as to whether the estate's right to publicity and the family's right to privacy shall be infringed upon by releasing the sensitive items pursuant to the New Mexico IPRA statute. IPRA is a sunshine law intended to disclose misconduct. No misconduct has been expressed in this matter, none. IPRA is about transparency in government action, but it is not an open-ended and does not allow the public and press open access to all government documents and material. There are exceptions. One of the exceptions is under the last exception under the code is under other law. And we would supply the court with other law, being that there's a right to privacy and a constitutional right to control the publicity of the states. The public does not have an open-ended right to exploit the material for personal gain. And in violation of the privacy rights of the Hackman estates in particular, there simply is no legitimate governmental purpose for releasing this material at this time. A preliminary injunction is the only proper remedy in this matter. If the requested videos, photos, and cam records are released, the estate has no assurance of how the material will be used. A bell cannot be unrung.
We know when deputies first arrived inside Hackman's house, they took several items as pieces of evidence in the investigation, and this is what that body cam video that has yet to be released could show. From the start, deputies have said there are no signs of foul play, but the couple's deaths were considered unique and suspicious because there were really no clues to tell them what had happened. Here's some of the items that deputies took from Hackman's home as evidence per a search warrant. There were 2 green cellular devices, thyroid medication, a calcium blocker high blood pressure medication, Tylenol, and records from MyQuest, which is how patients can schedule blood tests through Quest Diagnostics, as well as a 2025 monthly planner. A lawyer representing CBS and the Associated Press said this about why the public has a right to see the video and to look at documents that the Hackman estate wanted to block.
It is a very unusual request for any person or entity or estate to come to the court and say, we're asking you on behalf of our clients to enter an order that would prohibit state entities from doing their statutorily required roles. The particular records that are in question here are records that, as I understand it, of police activity that took place at the home in the form of photographs and video recordings, whether it be a lapel cam or body cam. And the other category of records is autopsy reports or materials collected by OMI or created by OMI in conjunction with their normal autopsy duties. And these are records that are, first of all, routinely produced by these entities in response to IPRA requests, because that's what IPRA requires. And second of all, in terms of the policy interests that are at play here as to whether these are sorts of documents representing police activity, representing OMI activity, representing public actions, are the kinds of records that should be disclosed.
This hearing went for 3.5 hours. Hackman's estate also raised questions about whether releasing the body cam video could create security concerns at the $3.3 million house where the couple lived. People is reporting that Betsy Arakawa's mom, Yoshi Feaster, put a statement in court documents trying to block graphic photos from being released. That statement read, quote, "I humbly come before this court to request that this court respect my right to grieve in peace and find that I have a constitutional right to avoid seeing images of my daughter's home, her dead body, her husband's dead body, and their dog's corpse. The public spectacle surrounding my daughter's death is one that no parent should have to live through." Eventually, the judge ruled that the public will be able to access the autopsies and see body cam video that the media is requesting, but there's a big but to that. There will not be any images allowed of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's bodies. It's unclear when this body cam video could be released, but I do want to say, because we look at Law&Crime at a lot of body cam video, and it is typical for law enforcement to blur or redact images like dead bodies. So it will be interesting to see exactly how much redaction there is on this body cam when it's released. And there's still questions about what will happen to the $80 million fortune that Gene Hackman created in his 40 years in film. We know that in 2005, Hackman's will stated that Betsy Arakawa was the sole beneficiary, so when he died, she would receive his assets. But Betsy ended up dying first, just days before Gene died. Betsy's will reportedly said that if Gene died first, her remaining money would go to a charitable trust benefiting the community. That's according to The Hollywood Reporter. Media reports also say that Gene's adult children were not named as beneficiaries of Hackman. It is unclear what kind of access they could have to this fortune. Joining us now to talk more about this is Tia Smith, a estate planning attorney. So a great person to have as we're trying to figure out this new element to this story involving Gene Hackman and his wife and their deaths. First question, just stripping away the attention on this case, the fact it's Gene Hackman, who's truly a Hollywood legend. How unique is the situation we're looking at here where you have this massive amount of money and it's really unclear what's going to happen to it?
Well, unfortunately, this situation is not unique. If it were, the states would not legislate around it. I tell folks all the time, if you own anything, whether the shoes in your closet, the paintings on the wall, then you need to have an estate plan in place. And there are instances where things get confusing. So it is a good idea to have things planned out. And even having things planned out does not protect you fully from having issues come up later, like we see in this case. But no amount of money, whether it's $100,000 in the bank or $80 million in the bank, should protect you from having to do what you need to do. Everyone needs an estate plan.
An interesting part of this is that Betsy Hackman passes away first from hantavirus, according to the authorities. And what we know at this point is that in 2005, Gene Hackman left everything to her. And then she signed something that left everything, if she were to die, to him. He dies days later. The timing of the deaths, how does that factor into what could happen to this money?
So from my understanding, I believe each of the parties had what was known as a pour over will. So in essence, what a pour over will is a version of a last will and testament that says that any property that I have in my estate, I would like to be governed by the terms of a trust. So typically clients will like to draft what's known as a revocable living trust, and then they'll want their assets to be managed by what's contained inside of that trust. If for any reason they forget to put something inside of the trust, then this pour over will acts as a catch-all provision by way of pouring everything left over that was inadvertently not included from the estate over into the trust to be managed by the trust. And in this instance, usually when we're constructing trust, we include what's known as a survivorship clause, which means that if any primary beneficiary that is named in the trust document does not survive the grantor or the will maker by a certain amount of time, then the will or the trust will treat that person as if they predeceased the will maker or the trust maker. So in this instance, if Gene left all of his assets to his wife, but in this instance, she predeceased him, then we will revert back to the terms of the trust. Are there any contingent beneficiaries that are listed? If there are no contingent beneficiaries that are listed, and that usually what happens is the state intestacy laws will kick in, meaning that the state will dispose of your property according to how they think you would have wanted it disposed of had you actually written it in your trust. So again, in this instance, if the wife did indeed pass before Gene, then the contingent beneficiaries will kick in, whomever they are. Typically, trust documents are not made public, but if there are contingent beneficiaries that are listed, they would inherit the estate. But if none are listed, then typically revert to intestacy laws, and then the estate is divided amongst the heirs.
Gene Hackman has 3 adult children. And they did speak yesterday during a hearing trying to restrict certain pieces of information being released to the public that police had gathered on the day of their deaths. If they aren't listed, and we don't know for sure, I mean, there's been reporting, but officially it's unclear whether they're beneficiaries. If they are not listed as a beneficiary to Gene Hackman's estate, what type of access could they have to the money that he's left behind?
Well, typically, heirs, even if they are not named beneficiaries, they are still legal heirs, which means that they are the next of kin. And whenever a probate process is kicked off, Typically, the next of kin are notified. They are included in that process, even if they don't stand to inherit anything. And also, the heirs also have a right to assert any type of claim. So, if we're talking about privacy issues, rights to claim any portion of the estate, as legal heirs, they are properly positioned to do that, even if they're not named beneficiaries.
Even with, and I don't know what their relationship was between Gene Hackman and his kids, but it doesn't appear from what they have said that they were in touch within the last couple of months at least. Does the closeness of a relationship that a next of kin has with, say, their father in this case, the dynamics of that relationship, does that factor at all into how things are determined if they were to try to gain access to this money?
That's a difficult question, but in most instances, no. So, again, states enact these laws to dispose of your estate according to how they think you would want to dispose of it. However, they are not well positioned to decide each case based on the unique family dynamics of that case. And so, if there were opportunities to leave the estate to other individuals and not the kids, then the states would want you to specify that in your written documentation. If you don't, and if they don't have any additional guidance, they have no choice but to use the state laws to distribute that estate.
How airtight are these laws? Say in a state, I don't know specifically or how they, whether it's California or New Mexico, but if the children were not listed as beneficiaries and say Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa Hackman decided that they wanted their money to go to, say, charity, for example, how difficult is it after the fact for an heir, a next of kin to then gain access to that amount of money?
It wouldn't be difficult. So the charity would have to do the same thing that the children are doing. They will have to go forth inside a probate court and make a claim against the estate, or state that, hey, we have some unique information and we are pretty sure that Gene and Betsy would not have wanted their the contents of their estate to go to their children. They're more than welcome to introduce any extrinsic evidence to support that. But again, ultimately, the court is left with figuring out what needs to happen. Should it go to charity or should it go to the legal heirs? Unless they have some evidence that specifies, for sure that they wanted to go to charity, then it's not difficult for not the beneficiaries, but it's not difficult for the heirs to make claims to the estate, because legally they are entitled to make claims if they are the next of kin and there is no one in between standing to inherit the estate.
There is an attorney, Julia Peters, who's representing the estate in court for Gene Hackman. You're an estate planning attorney. I mean, what is the role that they're playing at this point right now? Whether it's a case like yesterday where we saw certain media outlets trying to get access to images from inside the home to where the money goes.
Mm-hmm. Well, a personal representative, whether it be a trustee or an executor, serves to protect the estate and also to exercise its powers to distribute the estate according to what the testator wanted, right? And so their goal is to not create avenues to distribute the estate, but is to realize what is already in writing and fully execute what's already in writing. And again, the executor is going to be left to the devices of the courts. If there is legislation in place or there are state laws in place that specify how an estate is to be distributed, then they have to go according to the language in the will, also in conjunction with the language that's in state statute. It's not up to them to determine whether or not they should have some other beneficiary or someone else should be entitled to this money because they knew this person personally. That's not their decision to make. They are to execute the will or execute the distributions according to the terms of the will or the trust. And when it's silent, then they need to revert back to what state law says.
When we talk $80 million, I'm sure that includes real estate as well. This incredible home they had in Santa Fe, it was $3.3 million in value. Who's in charge of that house now, its upkeep, and what could happen to it in the future?
So the personal representative, the executor, or the trustee, it may be the same person, but they are in charge of keeping that property. So that means selling it, making sure the bills are paid, making sure maintenance issues are squared away, making sure that the home is secure, making sure that taxes are paid. So any matters related to the property, they are responsible for doing it. It only transfers to the beneficiary once they receive it from the estate. But for now, the personal representative of the estate is responsible for it.
How specific, I mean, especially assuming Gene Hackman knew, I mean, $80 million, it's a lot. I mean, that he had real estate, he had all these different elements. How specific are these? If we were to look at all the documents related to this estate, how specific are these documents in terms of everything that he owned?
Well, it depends. Usually at the intake process, when we're doing estate planning, we have clients to fully list out every single thing that they're own because it's difficult to draft an estate plan to accommodate the wishes of the testator if we are not aware of fully what they own. So he may have, and I'm assuming that he probably would have listed everything he owns during this drafting phase, which unfortunately was in 2005. So a significant amount of time has passed. But in essence, again, even though it was drafted in 2005, we don't stop accumulating things. So I'm assuming,
Right.
and again, we haven't had any real confirmation on this, but I'm assuming that he was probably continuously adding things to the trust. So whatever they provided in 2005 may not be a real accurate representation of what he actually owns right now, if there was no continuous planning going on. And since it was 2005, since they last signed the document, I'm assuming that there wasn't.
How long could it take to settle as far as where everything that Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy owned go?
Unfortunately, it can take a while. Um, Georgia is one of those states where you are not necessarily required to close an estate. So, in situations like this, where the how the property is to be distributed is complex. If you have a full grasp on what the decedent actually owned, it may take a while. It may be one of those situations where you just kind of leave the estate open indefinitely, but it could take I would imagine that it could take years. I do not think that this is something that would be disposed of in a few months. Absolutely not, because it could take a while just to get an inventory, i.e., what's out there. With investment properties, we know the real estate, the tangible things, but stocks, bonds, insurance policies, investment portfolios, all of that is considered a part of the estate.
Yeah, and I know that Betsy Arakawa Hackman, she was like an investor in a business too, in Santa Fe. It was like a luxury goods, so I'm sure that factors into this as well. This hearing yesterday, and there's started to become a debate over how much, at this point, this wasn't a case where there was foul play involved. How much access should the public have to seeing what police saw on that day? From an estate attorney perspective, when you represent something like this in court, what goes into making the argument if the family's will in terms of what they want is for certain pieces of information like that in a public case like this not to be released to the public?
Well, I think in this instance, the court did the best that they could given the circumstances. So we know that there is this right to privacy that is, presumed under the 14th Amendment. However, that right to privacy typically does not survive death. Now, there are some provisions that may accommodate medical records, such as HIPAA provisions and things of that nature that may leave medical information of a decedent protected. But again, you have to balance that out with the press's right to request this information and also have certain information released when there is an investigation going on. So again, we want to be decent, and I'm assuming that the court was treading lightly and being considerate of the family's needs and the fact that this is something that that the press would take and potentially publish, and not wanting pictures of their loved ones out there, but also balancing with the fact that, the press does have a right to know, and there is some limitations on the right to privacy. So again, given the circumstances, I think they did the best that they could. We know that pictures and photos and body cam will be redacted, so as to not display any of any bodies or anything for public consumption. So again, I think the court, they balanced the scales here as best they could.
What did you make of the argument? Because I think of Gene Hackman. I mean, everybody knows who Gene Hackman is. He's an A-list celebrity. Much of his life was in the public eye, and his wealth was accumulated because he was in the public eye. But we heard a lot ever since his death about just how private this couple was. I mean, they, no security cameras at the home. People didn't come and see them for weeks at a time because they were just so private, and people respected that. How typically does the court view how someone lived their life, especially in their final years, if they were someone who went out of their way to be private, which it does appear that the Hackmans did?
I mean, I think the court was considerate in taking that into account. From all accounts, we know that Gene was not making public appearances. It had been some time since folks had seen him out in public. And even before, I believe it may have been last year, but even before then, he had chosen to live his life at this stage out of the public eye. And again, I think the courts can consider how a person lived their life and balancing whether or not they would have approved of specific information being released for public consumption. But again, I think that the courts, they had a hard job. They had a hard job here. And given the circumstances, it is very tragic how they die, and I think it makes it especially sensitive. But given the circumstances and giving the county's right to release information regarding an investigation, and also privacy rights not really surviving past death, again, they can consider it, but I don't know if it would be completely dispositive. And obviously, in this case, it wasn't completely dispositive because the court still chose to release some of those records.
And just last question for you, and I think it's for a lot of people who are watching right now, and maybe you're thinking about your own will, your own estate planning, when you see that what the Hackman family is going through. I mean, how often should you be updating your will?
I tell my clients at a minimum every 3 to 5 years, or if a major life event happens. So there's a death, there's a birth of a child, the primary beneficiary to your estate passes away. There is a significant medical situation that happens and you need to resituate how you leave assets. Every 3 to 5 years is important to revisit your plan because things change. And, as one of my best friend's fathers used to say, the tree that's leaning the furthest isn't always the first to go, right? So you need to plan for long-term issues. If the person you name to be in charge of your estate dies before you, what do you have in place to ensure that your wishes are still carried out? We should never just rely on one person being around to do that for us.
All really good information for all of us watching, beyond those just interested in this case involving Gene Hackman and his wife, Tia Smith, estate planning attorney. Thank you for taking the time to join us here on Law&Crime. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. It's my pleasure.
One issue that seems to be cleared up is what has happened to Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's bodies. The couple's names were listed on New Mexico's medical investigator website as unclaimed descendants. People reported the medical investigator said just because their names were on that list doesn't mean that plans weren't in place for the bodies to be received, but it's unclear if Hackman's family claimed the bodies. All of Hackman's adult children live out of state. For On the Case presented by Law&Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.